Good morning, everyone, and welcome to GM Tips Part 2. GM Rick here. I hope everybody's having a great morning. And this part of it, remember, we went through some of the dynamics of the underwater adventures. And we were talking about combat, we were talking about buoyancy, we were talking about actions, spells, and other items that can be affected in your system when it comes to being underwater. And mind you, dynamics underwater are going to be very different. You're in a whole different medium to air-breathing worlds. It's like going to a different world, and it's 100% water. How are you going to handle the dynamics? It's like handling dynamics of different gravity, different bodily weights and masses and skeletal musculature, having the apparatus to survive in the environment. These all affect role play, and a lot of times we as GMs skip over or skim these, and I understand it. Look, we don't want to sacrifice the role play for the dynamic, but I think sometimes we sacrifice the dynamic and the role play it can create to make it easy for players. And I'm sorry, GMs, and I'm going to call some GMs on the carpet here with this. Don't simplify the system to the point of where it's just narrating a story. I'm sorry. To me, that is not game mastering. Okay, and you can argue it with me in cons or other places when you meet me. I think it's a cop-out. I truly do. I think it's a cop-out to say I don't want my job to be difficult to make it fun for the players. By the way, mini GM and Magic School Bus in the background. So I'm just telling you, don't sacrifice all the dynamics. The dynamics aren't that hard if you just take a little time to study them. And you can make yourself a note card to keep them in mind, or 2 or 3. It's fairly straightforward. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about, we didn't go a lot. We went into buoyancy, aquatic speed, freedom of movement, fighting, combat, how combat's affected, and, some of the other things. Now, perception and survival underwater. Both of those get affected. Now, in some systems, you may not have perception and survival as skills. I know in Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, Shadowrun, and a few other places, even in some of the GURPS systems, they'll have skills that are very similar to these. Survival being what a character uses to orient themselves in an environment they're not used to. And perception being how well you can discern what's going on, whether it's from hearing, sight, smell, touch. It is your way of letting you know what's going on. All right, so here's one of the things they mentioned in this guide. Love this guide, by the way, by Paizo Publishing. And I'm going to give credit where credit due. Amber Scott and Mark Seifter did a tremendously good job on this book. Love it. Well worth the money spent. One of the things they say on perception, and this is really key, even in clear water, the way light travels underwater makes it hard to see underwater than on land. Remember, diffraction. How does the light go through a water medium? It's like putting it through a prism or putting it through some other medium. Light is very different in water. So there's a lot of shadows, diffraction, other types of things, clouding of the light itself. So you don't see things. You sometimes will see shadows and other things that aren't there in that medium. So you take a -2 penalty on just standard water on your perception if you're a land-breathing creature. Now, mind you, this is land-breathing. I would say also with oceanic creatures, because even though you're used to the environment, it's a very large medium and a very strange medium. And so it will mess with your perception as you go through it. Now, let's see. Also, it says here, greater the penalty when it's murky. So the maximum distance creatures can see underwater varies from 4 to 320 feet in clear water, which is the 48 times 10, which you can roll as a GM, to 10 to 80 feet, which is a 1d8 in murky water. Most naturally aquatic creatures have eyes that have evolved to this. Surface creatures can use goggles to protect their eyes from the water, and it's particulous. Otherwise, they take a -4 perception check when they're underwater for a long time, and it can do eye damage long term. So remember, you can't just go into the water and expect everything to be okay. It's not how it works. especially in salt water. It is not a great medium for the eye. It's very damaging over time. Okay, and the other thing it says sound travels faster and faster underwater, but the benefit is usually mitigated by the ambient noise of moving water. So in situations with particular little noise, movement from the ambient water, the perception checks are better for hearing. It's at a +2. Otherwise, it's just normal. Because, again, if the water's lapping and splashing and the waves are crashing, you're not going to get much better perception. Now, survival. If you're an underwater creature with senses adapted to it, it is very different than the land-based creature that goes into the water. So, mind you, one of the things it says, creatures with keen scent, like sharks that can track blood, so Shahagan and other creatures like them, can go from a great distance and track much easier a wounded target than somebody who is not used to that medium. Okay. Otherwise, it's much harder to track a creature underwater with survival unless the target is moving along the bottom or through something that might leave some signs. The survival DC to track in such a situation starts at 10 and increases 1 for every 10 minutes the target has passed through that environment. So if they pass through an hour and a half, okay, so 90 minutes, you add 9 plus 19, or 10 is 19, so your DC goes to 19. So 3 or 4 hours, you see where we're going. It's going to get up to a DC 40 and 50, where eventually you're not going to be able to track them unless you're very high level. So keep that in mind. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, what trail are you going to leave other than blood in the water? None. Really none. And it doesn't help a creature trying to track in that condition. Underwater hazards. We talked about drowning, of course. Drowning happens when you're under the water for a long period of time. And like we talked about in the last one, it's your constitution score times 2 if you are a land-breathing or an oxygen-breathing creature. A water-breathing creature is different. Now, depths and other things can affect you with crushing damage and other things like that and the bends, but you're not going to drown if you're a water breather. If you're not a water breather, you can easily drown. And every round that you take an action, it takes 1 round of your breath away. So say you're swinging a falchion underwater, which is a huge no-no, but you're doing it because you got freedom of movement, you still expel air. You can't just hold your breath and do a physical action like that. And so you lose a round of your ability to keep your breath, holding your breath. So every action you do detracts. And so having something that allows you to breathe underwater is critical. Now, if you have if you intentionally exhale breath, it expends 1 to 3 rounds of action from that exhalation, usually coming from casting a spell. So if you got a verbal component and you have to say it, and you're expelling air to do it, pushing the water away from you. That's going to affect you, and just keep that in mind. So silent spell and some of these other meta magic feats all of a sudden become majorly handy if you're a Pathfinder player. If you're a D&D player, you're pretty much SOL. Or GURPS or some of the others. They don't have the meta magic feats, so they don't give you that ability to do silent spell, still spell, and all these other things that are real helpful for you. Now, here's what happens. When you are out of breath, when you have finally lost all your breath, now you're on a razor's edge of life. All right? So here's what happens. Round 1 is a DC 10. For you to make a save, to try to reorient yourself and not drown and go up. You've got to go up. Now, if you're real deep, you're pretty well SOL. Okay? If you make your save, that's great. Then it increases each round after that to try to survive by 1. If you fail, you fall unconscious and go to -1 hit points and start dying as if you were critically injured and taken below 0 hit points. That is why water is dangerous. And yes, GMs, DMs, do not back out of this. This is the challenge of being underwater. If you are an air breather, okay? If you're a water breather, no issue. If you're an air breather, issue, okay? And this is where the challenge of being underwater is a true challenge even to heroes. You are an air breather. You do not breathe water. I don't care what kind of background you are. I don't care if you're mythic. You do not breathe water. And so you're going to start taking damage. Now, you may have that ability that you never die, okay? So then you just stay unconscious under the water until something comes along and eats you. That's okay, too. But keep in mind, you really want to play this up. Make it as scary as it really is. And the farther down you are, the scarier it is. It is a real situation and a real phobia for most people. And it is a reality even for heroes. That if you're not from the water and the ocean, it's dangerous to be there. All right? The other thing we talked about is crushing depths. So, pressure. Most aquatic creatures have adapted to the depths corresponding roughly to one or more of the zones of these zones. So it's up to you as a GM to figure out what zones your player is used to. If their city is on a zone that is in the abyss, then guess what? They're used to all the zones. And so, with maybe the exception of the upper light zones where they're not used to seeing. So they may have some detraction to getting up into the light and have problems and also get the bends. Because the bends go both ways. It goes up and it goes down. So if a waterborne creature is going up too fast that's from the depths, it can go through the bends as well. Now the bends are 1d6 damage if you don't make your fortitude save. Usually it did DC 15, but it increases by 1 for every minute past the first that you're going into that. And for every 100 feet beyond the zone that you're used to, the zones you're used to, is another D6 of damage. So D6, 2D6, 3D6, 4D6 on up. You can take 100 D6. Nah, wouldn't say that. I'd cap it at probably 20, but you can still take some serious damage. Temperature affects you. If you're from the cold and you go to the hot, it's uncomfortable for you, and vice versa. So that whole temperature effect comes in, though you can do it in endure elements, which will allow you to overcome that type of effect. And then there are different types of zones. Currents in the water can affect you. So you have to do swim checks, and your swim checks get roughly harder if you're caught in very heavy currents and you don't know what you're doing. Whirlpools can do the same thing. Conditions are rough in a maelstrom condition that it takes a DC 40 or higher for creatures. So if you've got a maelstrom-style whirlpool, so think of Pirates of the Caribbean, where Calypso opens that little thing and it's going like this. Or if you're on the world of the Inner Sea campaigns and you are in the Eye of Bendigo, this is a reality. DC 40 or higher, creatures caught in a whirlpool take 1d6 of bludgeoning damage every round for every 50 feet of the whirlpool's speed. So say the whirlpool is going 100 miles an hour. So, or so many feet per second. You're going to get pummeled. And that's just normal. So, they have some cool classes in here, too. They've got a couple that you guys want to get to see. They have the Aquimist, which is an alchemist type. The Aquanaut, a fighter type. The Aquatic Blood Rager type. The Drowned Chandler type. The Ocean Rider, which is a Cavalier archetype. So, for D&D, convert these over to your system. These are some cool archetypes that you can do for your things. The Wave Riders, which is also a Cavalier order. The Pearl Seeker, which is a Paladin type. Now, I gotta say, I love the art. I love the shell armor. Love it. That's your underwater plate mail right there that's not too heavy duty, but still protects you. I love the breastplate, which is also made out of a coral type on her. Love how they do the different things. They've got a Pelagic Hunter, which is in the Hunter type. Hunter is not a class that maybe is converted to D&D or GURPS. You could convert it from Pathfinder. I love the Hunter. It's a flip between a Ranger and a Rogue type, so it's kind of cool. Or no, Ranger and Druid. Sorry, Ranger and Druid. Tidal Trickster, which is a Rogue type. They got underwater gear in here. So that's the last up on the different things you can go through on this one. Now, let's go to the setting, because they talk a lot about settings. One thing that you're going to find is you're going to have different types of creatures that are in the water and type of empires that are down there. So, identify for your seeds what type of creatures you want. I always think that Shahagan are a must. They are the shark predator types of any type of campaign. For those of you that don't have them in your system, please convert them in. Shahagan are well worth having. Scum are another one. They come out of the Call of Cthulhu end of things. They're kind of a degenerate fish folk, and they're nasty, nasty, nasty. Then there's the deep ones. The deep ones are another type of Call of Cthulhu creature. In some cases, you have merfolk, or you have aquatic elves. You have, let me think of some of the other ones that are out there. Locatha, the fish folks. So the ones that look like fish folks are the Locatha. Locatha are really cool. Now, Pathfinder has some other types that are interesting as well that I think may be worth converting over to other systems. Where are they? Ocean denizens, the different types of kingdoms. Dang, I always have to go through here. There's the Gillmen, which are the Aslanti in this one. These are basically the raised up Atlantis types that actually got converted and perverted. You have the ones that look like Ursula, the half octopus, and in our campaign they're half octopus, half shark. But we also have half octopus and other types. So I love the Garia. Garia is a Shahagan pirate. I love these things. So, Gilman, Shahagan. Oh, Lord, they've got so many. The Shahagan Empire is really good. The sea denizens in this one, in the Castrovian Sea, are Marrows and Scrags. Marrows and Scrags are also other races that are interesting. So one thing I would say, whatever campaign you run, make sure you have as many diverse races in the ocean as you have on the shore. It makes it well worth doing. And you don't want to limit yourself there. Why should you? There's all kinds of evolutions you can do for underwater people. A great guide from Kobold Press, and I hope you guys can see this, is Sunken Empires. Love this. So if you're not into, and they do it for both D&D 5e and Pathfinder, so easy to convert to pretty much any system. The ideas are great. So if you don't want to buy the Pathfinder ones and try to base it off of what they're doing for their worlds and empires, Sunken Empires hits a lot of different empires. They do the Lemurians, the Aboleth. I love that they talk about the history of the Aboleth. If you ever want to know about these nasty creatures that control the mind, this is a great book that goes through that. So the Lost Cities they have is Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, and Ankshell, and the Twin Cities of Cassiopeia, and they even give you maps of them. So I love, and these are easily moved, whether you're doing Midgard or your own, you can easily drop these right into your campaign. And I know some of you are doing campaigns. So design a lot of cities. You're going to have a ton of cities. There's probably not as many cities on the ocean floor as there are on the surface, but you got to remember, most worlds are usually 2/3 or more water, unless you've reversed it the other way and made it water depleted. Most worlds are heavily oceanic, and so you got to think, what's going to evolve and exist down there? And these cities are full of different riches and sunken treasures from ships that have been destroyed by typhoons and by the different hurricanes. Now, keep in mind, as you go across these waters, it's a great segue to drop your players into. Maybe they're traveling to another continent or another island, and they get caught in this epic storm which sinks their vessel. And unfortunately, they're pulled to the bottom of the waters, and they have to be prepared for this. You can prepare the situation however you want. But then they're plunged into these empires. So don't limit yourself on this. You have to really think about what you want to do to draw them in. Now, if they're already from the underwater areas, great. There's a lot of races that you can use. You can use merfolk. You can use aquatic elves. You can use Locatha. You can use Shahagan if you want to give them an evil tilt on things. You can have a wereshark that can be part of the wereshark family, or a were crocodile or alligator, like a big salty that goes out in the ocean. They can be what's the other ones outside of the merfolk? Gillmen. You could convert the gillmen. The gillmen are basically a human being that developed gills along their neck. So the gillmen are a great choice to convert into a system. You can do a scrag, which is, scrags are pretty interesting little critters if you haven't seen them. So I will see if I can pull a scrag up here for a picture of a scrag. But we're going to do this to give you guys some ideas of what the different things are. All right, so let's look at a scrag. All right, give me 2 seconds here. I should have had a lot of these up here before, but you know, as you know, you get into talking about something and all of a sudden the ideas hit. And so forgive me for looking down. They never tell you to look down during a cast, but yeah. Oh, I love these guys. So scrags are the trolls. So if you want to let them be an underwater troll, there's also underwater ogres. There are underwater ogres. I believe they're called, are they the marrow, I think? Let's see, underwater. Let's look at the marrow. I believe the marrow are what those are. All right. Yeah, there you go. That's a perfect example. These are there. That's a marrow. Pathfinder underwater races. So we'll give you some more underwater races. This, oh yeah, this is perfect. So if you want to see the Cerulean Seas, what types of underwater critters there are. I'm sorry it's not a little clearer, but it kind of gives you an idea. This is a Grindylow. A Grindylow is part shark, part Ursula. Okay. Yeah, that's a Shahagan. That's a aquatic elf. Undine, you can do Undine. Undine are great. They're a elemental race. Now you have different races in D&D that are your water races, but the Undine are part of there. There's a male aquatic elf. Lovely little critters they can do. Oh boy, there's so many more. Aquatic elves, lizard folk. Nixies. Oh yeah, you can do a Nixie. Didn't even think about a Nixie. So there's a lot of different underwater races you can let your players be. It just depends. I mean, here's the reptilian if you want to do like a lizard man that's an underwater lizard man. There's a lot of different races you can adapt to the ones that are there. That's a deep one. You could do Kuatoa. If you're in D&D, you can do a Kuatoa. So there's a lot of different races you can use from the underwater side of things, all right? And you want to really flesh out their empires, and they're uniquely different from what they can be on the upper realms. You can do Orvian type of races, so underwater drow, why not? Drow don't have to be limited to the land. You can put them in the water if you want. So you have your regular aquatic elves and your drow aquatic elves. Keep in mind, a lot of times under these underwater empires, they worship the sea gods and goddesses and the demons, or sometimes the Imperials. And so you want to have pantheons that make sense for the water. I mean, yes, could you do a goddess like Sarenrae in the water? Yeah, you kind of can, but it really doesn't sit right, does it? Doing St. Cuthbert underwater. Yeah, you could. Or in my case, for Pathfinder, Caden Kayleen. Yeah, you could. It just, or does make sense. Now, Desna makes a lot of sense. Goddess of the Moonlight and Dreams, that makes a lot of sense. Cthulhu-esque ones, of course they make sense. You're in the deep depths of the nether regions. So you got to keep in mind, you want to make sense of your Pathians that are down there. Lots of sunken ships, of course, and there's going to be things guarding those ships. They're not going to give that up easily. So Krakens and Scylla and Charybdis type of creatures, yes. You want to have a lot of different types of encounters. And the underwater encounters, in some cases, are much more dangerous. You can run into dinosaurs, so dinosaur type of fish, or dinosaurs themselves, aquatic dinosaurs. You know, when you're down in those depths, a lot of things evolve in ways that you don't expect. And so there's a lot of unique things. Could you have an underwater spider? Of course you could. There are such things that adapt. Underwater centipedes, why not? Why couldn't you? In fact, your vermin types and your molluscal types much more prevalent as you get to the ocean floor. Could you have Sagothi come out like you have in the Sagothi of the worm folks from the Underdark? Why not? Could you have an underwater Illithid? Of course. Could you have an underwater intellect devourer? Reasons why you wouldn't? There's a lot of things you can do to really turn your campaign into some interesting and unique different types of adventures to the underwater. And keep in mind, you want to really play out the difference from the land to your players, especially if they're not of an underwater type. This is foreign. This is truly like going into the deepest depths of the Underdark. That's how different it is from the surface. And it is not like The Little Mermaid, under the sea. I love that, but no. No. And I understand some of you GMs are thinking, yes, Sebastian, no. No. As a dad who's a Disney dad, no. Do not pervert how dangerous the undersea world is by doing a singing Sebastian at the bottom of the sea. Please do not do that. All right? I know it's humorous. It's fun. Don't go there. It is not going to be an Ariel type of, woo, it's all pretty and nice. No. It is predatorial. Much more dangerous than the land. Much more crazy. Now, the good creatures under the water are benevolently good. The neutrals are that kind of uncaring. And the evils are that vicious and dark. So make it into a much more macabre style campaign of underwater. Because it is. It's not this bright, beautiful place that everything is hunky-dory. You're living in an environment that if you're a surface dweller going down there is a constant threat to your well-being and your lifespan. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind the effects of things. Keep in mind the different things you need to incorporate. But make it fun. Make it impactful. Make it memorable. Do these things. They're going to have a great campaign coming out for those of you that want an underwater campaign. Pathfinder and Adam Daigle are putting out a Lost Aslanti Empire, which you can turn into Atlantis or whatever you want, for specifically underwater adventures. And it's going to be freaking cool. It starts on the land, ends in the water. Love it, love it, love it. It's going to be epic. And so if you want something like that to base campaigns off of, that's going to be a good one to look at and to get into your collection if nothing else. All right, I've gone 30 minutes. I knew this would go long. This is almost an hour on underwater stuff. You guys knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. So have a great time adventuring. Normally I'll keep them shorter, but this one is well worth the time spent. Take care, and please do yourself a favor. Get this and the Sunken Empires one I showed you from Kobold Press. Thanks again, and take care.